Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan, His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 2 From Larkana to Bombay, 1928 to 1947. Zulfi's mother was careful to note the precise minute and hour of her precious son's birth, for though she had converted to Islam before marriage, Lakhi Bhai never lost her Hindu faith in astrology. Begum Bhutto had her son's horoscope cast by an old Bombay Brahman astrologer as soon as she could after Zulfi's birth on 5th January 1928. A close friend who much later saw the horoscope reported that the astrologer had predicted everything: Zulfi's marriages, his singular success, and remarkable power up until the age of 50. Beyond which, the old man refused to say any more, vaguely muttering to Zulfi's mother, "I don't know what I see." Buppa, Zulfi's baby name, was a frail child, always ailing, his elder sister Manna recalled, frequently down with head colds during Larkana's brief but often bitter winters. At the age of 3, he ran so high a fever from influenza, possibly compounded by malaria, that we almost lost him. Zulfi's mother rushed off in desperation to pray at the shrine of Lal Shehbaz and was later convinced that her son's swift recovery after she returned home was thanks to Sindh's greatest Sufi saint. More than 40 years later, as Prime Minister of Pakistan, Zulfi prayed at the same shrine and ordered a pair of solid gold doors to be installed there. No familiar bond in South Asia is closer than that which ties a son to his mother. Yet, Zulfi's deep emotional attachment to his young, often lonely mother was even stronger, it seems, than the norm among the families as large as the Bhuttos. Not only was Khurshid the younger bride, which naturally strained her relations with Shah Nawaz's first wife and her tight family coterie, but her outcast birth and religious differences compounded her sense of ostracism in that clannish Larkana family. Her only local friends, indeed, were the young Sindhi wife of Larkana's superintending engineer, Mrs. G. N. Mirchandani, and a Hindu neighbor, Mrs. Shivdasani. Her first child was a comfort to Khurshid, but daughters rarely raised a rural mother's prestige or family power, because with marriage a daughter must leave home of her birth and generally take a substantial dowry with her, rarely returning again except when in need of help or care. A son, however, could be a prince. He might one day become Vadero Khan Bhutto, even though his elder half-brother Imdad Ali was the designated heir. Zulfi's mother, moreover, knew that her son was destined for greatness. Was he not the brightest, sweetest, dearest child ever born? She adored, clung to, and hopelessly spoiled him as only a desperately lonely, virtually outcast, insecure young mother can spoil a darling son. Wherever Khurshid went, Buppa, Zulfi went with her. First at her breast, then at her hip, and once he could walk holding her hand, never beyond her reach. It was as if she feared that losing touch with him would sever her own lifeline to the Bhutto world. Her busy husband rarely saw her anymore, and most of his clannish family viewed her as an intruder from a hostile remote world, neither Sindhi nor Muslim by birth, who had shamelessly seduced the old Vadero, dancing her way into his heart. Zulfi's mercurial temperament, the strange sudden shifts in his mood, his suspicious ambivalence toward most people, even his closest friends and colleagues, may in some measure be traced to his doting mother and aloof father, and to the inherent incompatibilities of their worlds and natures. One basically marginal and insecure, the other overconfidently arrogant. His genetic code was at any rate a curious blend of polar qualities. Shah Nawaz's feudal pomp and power, Lakhi Bhai's low caste fears, lack of familial fortune, deep seated doubts as to her very worth, her own tenuous toehold in the Bhutto world. She had entered by a side door of passion left ajar. How many other darkest hidden anxieties had this mother conveyed to her frail, sensitive child? No records survive of her whispered words to him in the long days and nights of their unbroken intimacy. Yet, Zulfi's mother surely communicated more than her mystic faith in astrology and the power of prayer to immortal saints to her only son. All the superstitious traditional castes fears of Hindu India, her ingrained belief in rebirth and karmic pollution in the impact of every deed, and the dark dangers of mixing forbidden human fruits and duties, dangers worse than death, for death itself could mean release from rebirth. The highest form of happiness, escape from the traumas of life and all the hateful curses of jealousy. Surely, she must have conveyed through her small body's mother's milk itself her deepest fears of strange foreign enemies everywhere within the very walls and shaded rooms of the house where they lived, among his father's closest relatives, his jealous first wife, and her kitchen coterie of spies and servants. All the clashing pluralisms of South Asia itself, a riverine blend of Hindu Muslim, high born and outcast passions, conflicts, harmonies, and hatreds, flowed in Zulfi's blood, an inharmonious mix of light and dark, a microcosmic reflection of Islam's violent assault upon and unstable conquest of the body politic of Hindudom. And added to that impossible blend, of course, was the superimposed external world of an English Christian West, whose patina of polite privilege and imperial arrogance had been donned with knighthood and knee breeches by his proud, pompous prince of a father, Magistrate Vadero of Larkana, Sindh's Mughal on the imperial council, a red-cheeked English governor's boon, companion and right-hand man. Was it any wonder Zulfi should be so strangely complex, inherently incompatible within his many psyches, forever unsure of which Bhutto he was, Hindu outcast, Sufi saint, or the Zulfikar's sword of Islam? The sword, Zulfikar, that first belonged to Caliph Hazrat Ali and was used to liberate Arabia's poor, converting them to Islam. Zulfi attended the convent kindergarten school at Bishop's High School in Karachi for just a few months after he turned 6, before Bombay's governor, Lord Brabourne, invited Sir Shah Nawaz to join his cabinet in 1934. Since provisional separation had been agreed upon in London but would not take effect till elections could be held under the new Government of India Act in 1937. Lord Brabourne knew Sir Shah Nawaz well enough, however, to want his immediate advice on matters affecting the Muslims of Sindh as well as Bombay. So the Bhutto family left Karachi late in 1934 on a P&O liner steaming for 3 days and nights across the Arabian Sea to the beautiful Bombay harbour, the British Raj's cosmopolitan gateway to India. As the governor's leading Muslim minister, Sir Shah Nawaz was given a splendid home atop Malabar Hill, Bombay's most gracious residential area overlooking the bay with its Sugarloaves Island. Young Zulfi enjoyed his new big house, playing hide and seek in its many spacious rooms with his sisters. His father's third and only other child, a younger daughter named Benazir, meaning matchless, was just 3 at the time, old enough to join in some games. Zulfi adored her, as only an elder brother can feel about his lovely young sister. But his first Benazir's health was to prove more fragile than his own had been. She would succumb to influenza at her boarding school in Pune at the tender age of 14. Zulfi visited his sister's grave whenever he came to India, and when his first child was born a decade later, insisted on naming her Benazir. For all his power and natural sagacity, Sir Shahnawaz, who never graduated high school, became keenly sensitive about his lack of formal education after moving to Bombay. Daily contact with Lord Brabourne and His Highness the Aga Khan, both of whom lived nearby, and with his cultured Parsi commercial neighbor Sir Homi Modi and Jawaharlal Nehru's charming sister Krishna Nehru Huthi Singh, who lived next door, made him feel acutely conscious of his intellectual handicap. Sir Shahnawaz resolved, therefore, to spare no resources to assure that his brightest son should receive the best possible education money could buy. Zulfi's mother, however, was determined to keep her favorite at her side as long as possible. Sir Shahnawaz managed to enroll his younger son in Bombay's Cathedral High School in 1937 at the age of 9. Yet, though Zulfi had reached that school's eligible age of admission, Colonel Hammond, Cathedral's principal, thought that in view of Zulfi having been taught at home before this, it might be best for him to join the girls' school before he could be admitted to Cathedral Boys' First Standard. Young Zulfi, however, revolted at the idea, and the British colonel liked his spirit, patting him on the back, admitting him to boys first without further demur. By thus striking a pose of bluff self-assertion and self-confidence, Zulfi got what he wanted. It became a pattern of his life in times of crisis. The young man soon entered Savage House at posh Cathedral High and took pride in his handsome green Boy Scout uniform with its road-polished leather belt, short pants, and high black woolen socks held to his calves by shiny green ribbons tied above bright white sneakers. Zulfi was still painfully slight, only skin and bones held together by a squeaky, high-pitched voice, as his friend at Cathedral High, Pilo Mudi, 1926 to 1980, recalled, perceptively finding his whole makeup somewhat incongruous. Pilo was to finish his secondary education at the more prestigious British Indian Doon School in Dehradun's hill station and would then return to Bombay to the new palatial mansion his father had built for the family on Carmichael Road, across the way from the Bhutto's Ghia mansion. Pilo's cousins, Silu and Jahangir Lal Mughesat and Umar Qureshi and his cricket star friend Mushtaq Ali were Zulfi's companions in Bombay. Those were cricket and film watching years of fun and joy, a carefree life devoted to much pleasure. Pilu reminisced. Zulfi's subsequent passions for fine food and wine, expensive clothes, and buxom women blossomed then. He worried much less about his studies than Pilo, failing the first senior Cambridge examination he took in 1945. By then, he had other distractions from schoolwork. Zulfi was only 13 when he was first married to an older cousin, Shireen, whose married name is Amir Begum. She was one of the 3 daughters of his wealthiest uncle, Khan Bahadur Ahmad Khan Bhutto, 1/3 of whose Vadero estates would be inherited by Zulfikar after his father-in-law's death. The bride was much older than her adolescent groom, but he took her to Kashmir's Srinagar for their honeymoon and handed all bills for that happy holiday to his father-in-law, who reluctantly paid. Zulfikar assured his second bride, Begum Nusrat, on the eve of their marriage that his first marriage was purely for the property. He insisted that he felt no physical attraction for his cousin wife, who remained at Al-Murtaza in Larkana, coming only briefly for special family reunions to Karachi. Some close friends, however, recalled that he not only enjoyed marital intimacy with his first wife, with whom he slept during his frequent visits to Larkana, but that shortly after his daughter Benazir was born, Amir Begum also gave birth to a daughter. That was later, however, after he returned from his university years abroad. Zulfi's closest relatives all deny that he had any offspring from his first wife, who still lives in Larkana, though she now comes quite often to Karachi. As president of the Sindh Mohammedan Association from 1925 through 1934, Sir Shah Nawaz had led his province's politically conscious Muslims for most of the decade prior to his departure for Bombay and confidently expected to win election from Larkana to Sindh's new legislative assembly as soon as elections were announced. He was elected leader of the newly organized Sindh United Party, all of whose members were Muslims. The deputy leader was Sir Haji Abdullah Haroon, 1872 to 1942, Karachi's leading entrepreneur. The party wisely offered cooperation to Karachi's Hindus, thereby attracting many more votes than the competing Sindh Muslim Party, led by Sir Shah Nawaz's arch rival for control of Sindh, lawyer Sir Ghulam Hussain Hidayatullah, 1879 to 1948, who had the support of Larkana's other wealthy Vadero clan, the Kohros. When the votes had been counted for Sindh's new assembly late in February of 1937, Sir Shah Nawaz's United Party won a clear majority. As his party's leader, of course, Sir Shah Nawaz should have been named the first Chief Minister of Sindh. The new British governor, Sir Lancelot Graham, had indeed been ready to do just that, but much to the governor's amazement, Shah Nawaz lost his own Larkana seat to a virtually unknown young man, Sheikh Abdul Majid Sindhi, who had campaigned vigorously with the strong backing of Vadero M.A. Kohro, 1901 to 1980. Overconfident Shah Nawaz had hardly bothered to return to Larkana during the campaign. That rejection by his own people came as so shocking a political blow to him that he opted to quit politics rather than accept Governor Graham's offer of appointment to his cabinet without a seat in Sindh's assembly. I thought all was going well. Graham reported from Sindh's government house in Karachi to Viceroy Lord Linlithgow in Delhi that March of 1937. But it fell to pieces in 2 or 3 days over the division of the spoils. I have decided to drop Shah Nawaz as he said that he could not be happy with Sir Ghulam Hussain as Chief Minister. Hussain, who is easily the most competent man in the province, has agreed to advise me. There's a lot of intrigue going on about the speakership. Siyasat. Young Zulfi may have taken much to heart the lesson of his father's election defeat, resolving even at his tender age never to risk losing an election, no matter how high a price need to be paid to ensure victory. Sir Shah Nawaz, however, by then too tired for public contests, accepted defeat philosophically. Never again would he subject his fate to the will of a fickle majority. Bombay's governor liked him so well that he offered him the plum of membership on the prestigious and powerful Public Service Commission for Bombay and Sindh, a post he held and would chair in comfort till 1946, when he left Bombay to become Diwan, Prime Minister of Junagadh. Ironically, the father of Sindh's independent provincial status thus found no seat in the newly elected government of Sindh convened in Karachi in 1937, just a decade before that fast-growing port city became the capital of the new nation of Pakistan. Since 1930, at least, the idea of a separate Muslim nation called Pakistan, land of the pure, had been mooted by Muslim leaders of British India, most important among whom was the great Urdu poet-philosopher Muhammad Iqbal, 1877 to 1938. Iqbal, who presided over the Muslim League's meeting at Allahabad in December 1930, called for the amalgamation of Punjab, the northwest frontier province, Sindh and Balochistan into a single state as the final destiny of Muslims, at least of northwest India. A few years later, several students in Cambridge, whose leader was Rahmat Ali, started a Pakistan national movement and wrote widely circulated pamphlets about Pakistan as the Muslim fatherland, demanding its immediate creation, a demand based on justice and equity. It was not until 1937 that Muhammad Ali Jinnah finally lost faith in the possibility of reaching a political agreement with Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and their National Congress, which seemed to him more arrogantly Hindu in the wake of election victories. That October of 1937, he donned his Persian lamb, Jinnah cap, and long black sherwani coat for the first time in Lucknow to urge more than 5,000 Muslim delegates to unite and work for the cause of your own people and your country. Jinnah assured his followers that with 80 million Muslims, they had destiny in their hands and nothing to fear from a Hindu Congress. 2.5 years later, in March 1940, Jinnah addressed a much larger audience in Lahore, where the famous resolution, known to history as the Pakistan Resolution, was adopted. The Muslims are not a minority. The Muslims are a nation, thundered the League's great leader. The problem in India is not of an intercommunal but manifestly of an international character. The only course open to us all is to allow the major nations separate homelands by dividing India into autonomous national states. For the next 7 years, till the dominion of Pakistan would be carved out of once united British India with partition of Bengal as well as Punjab. This Pakistan demand was to remain the single platform of Jinnah's Muslim League, which after the end of World War II spoke for India's Muslim majority. During the war years, Shah Nawaz met Jinnah often at the office of their Bombay physician, Dr. Jal R. Patel, on Hornby Road. Shah Nawaz's heart and various stomach ailments, including ulcers, kept him at almost daily visitor to Bombay's most sociable chronic bachelor doctor, whose lavish afternoon teas were as renowned as his medical reputation. Jinnah had fatal spots on both lungs before war's end, but for Dr. Patel's professional silence about the X-rays he had taken of them, Pakistan might never have been born, at least not in 1947. If Nehru had realized how precarious the health of his arch adversary was, he might well have waited instead of agreeing to Lord Mountbatten's proposed partition plan. But the urbane, diminutive Dr. Patel, a lecturer in Bombay's Medical College, had taken his Hippocratic oath to heart. He was, moreover, specially indebted to Sir Shah Nawaz, who, as Bombay's Minister of Health, accelerated the young doctor's promotion. Patel's patients included most of Bombay's great names of the time: Parsi industrialist J.R.D. Tata, Sir Kawasji Jahangir, as well as Jinnah and Sir Shahnawaz Bhutto. Zulfi's Cathedral High School was nearby, and Outram Road. And if he was not watching cricket or going for a swim after school at 4, he would walk over to Hornby Road and climb the stairs to join Dr. Patel's clinic tea party, which started daily at 4:30 and usually lasted till 6 p.m. Zulfi generally sat with my mouth shut, he later recalled, ears wide open. However, as he listened to Sir Kawasji and others press Jinnah to define Pakistan in territorial terms, or when healthy Hindu banker S.D. Skoroff argued that a separate Muslim nation could never be economically viable. Jinnah's answers to such questions, Bhutto remembered, were the kind of replies that made me feel proud of him. Zulfi wrote his first letter to Jinnah in 1945 while he was on holiday with Pilu at posh Mussoorie Hotel. At 17, he may have felt twinges of political guilt for going off during school break to eat enormous quantities of food and take lessons in ballroom dancing, while so many of his less fortunate contemporaries who had taken a stand for Indian independence throughout the war were still languishing behind British prison bars or had suffered broken bones from police lathi charges. Muslims should realize that the Hindus can never and will never unite with us. They are the deadliest enemies of our Quran and our Prophet, wrote young Zulfi to his great leader on 26th April 1945. You, sir, have brought us under one platform and one flag, and the cry of every Muslim should be onward to Pakistan. Our destiny is Pakistan. Our aim is Pakistan. Nobody can stop us. We are a nation by ourselves and India is a subcontinent. You have inspired us and we are proud of you. Being still in school, I am unable to help the establishment of our sacred land, but the time will come when I will even sacrifice my life for Pakistan. The war's end in Europe that June precipitated a change of government in London. Winston Churchill's Tory-led cabinet was displaced by Clement Attlee's Labour leadership, whose cabinet mission flew to India determined to find an acceptable constitutional formula through which a transfer British power to indigenous hand. The three-tiered federal constitution devised by Sir Stafford Cripps, Lord Pethick Lawrence and Admiral A.V. Alexander was after hard negotiations accepted by Jinnah for his league as well as by Congress High Command under Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, 1888 to 1958 presidency. Azad then made what he subsequently called a mistake of Himalayan dimension, nominating Jawaharlal Nehru to succeed him as Congress president. For that July, Nehru, at his first press conference in Bombay, announced that Congress would enter the forthcoming Constituent Assembly completely unfettered by agreements, rejecting the basic premise on which the cabinet mission's delicately constructed plan had been erected. Nehru's remarks to the press undermined Muslim confidence in Congress's willingness to work the plan without prejudice. Jinnah lost the last shred of faith he had in the higgling banyas of Congress and most regretfully felt obliged to say goodbye to the constitutions and constitutional methods. He called upon his league and the Muslim nation behind it to take direct action. A month later, launching a tragic full year of communal civil war in mid-August 1946, South Asia's bloody prelude to partition and the birth of Pakistan. He was invited to Jinnah's Malabar Hill home with a small group of Muslim students to advise their Qaid-e-Azam about how best to launch direct action in Bombay. Everyone talked in circles and vague language. Zulfi Bhutto recalled 32 years later, in his death cell, I remarked that Bombay was a Maharashtrian stronghold and Elphinstone College was a student fortress of the Maharashtrian militant students. Some kind of a strike in Elphinstone College would have tremendous psychological effect. He knew the son of Elphinstone's principal, Arun Seal, his classmate at Cathedral High. So together they rounded up about 200 local students who staged a sit-in inside, blockading the college entryway. The police were called, but the principal, anxious to avoid hurting his son, closed down the college instead of asking the police to clear the passageway. Jinnah was very pleased because all Bombay newspapers carried reports of the direct action protests, giving Zulfi's baptism in a long career of political action publicity quite out of the proportion to achievement. Sir Shah Nawaz also enlisted in the Pakistan movement in 1946, resigning his Public Service Commission chair to move to Junagadh state. Veerawal, that princely state's port capital, is some 400 miles south of Karachi on the Arabian Sea. Jinnah and Shah Nawaz had agreed that it was worth trying to wrestle wealthy Junagadh from Indian control, especially because it was so close to Mahatma Gandhi's birthplace. The Muslim Nawab accepted his new Diwan's advice, but Sardar Patel himself, born in Gujarat, had not the slightest intention of ever letting Junagadh leaving the Indian Union. Zulfi remained alone in Bombay after his father and mother moved with their daughter to Junagadh. He then lived in the Nest, their home on Carmichael Road, and watched over another Bhutto property in Bombay's busy fort area, the multi-storied Hotel Astoria building, net rental from which was more than 110,000 rupees, a not insubstantial sum in 1946 to 1947. There were many securities, other valuables, and cash left in the hands of the bright and precocious 18-year-old Zulfikar, who was a decade later to become sole heir to his father's fortune. With countless cricket matches to watch by day and several posh clubs to visit nightly, Zulfi had his hands full. He was also obliged to retake his senior Cambridge examinations, having failed it in 1945. He hoped to continue his education abroad, and though that initial failure made it impossible for Zulfi to enroll in any college of Cambridge or Oxford immediately, he might still manage to finish at one of the most prestigious schools if he did well for a year or two at some easier to enter college in the United States. With the war over in Europe and the havoc of pre-partition communal riots spreading across South Asia, Zulfi, Pilo, and their wealthy Bombay friends all resolved to go abroad for higher education. Pilu decided to study architecture and felt that the United States would prove more fertile ground for that than England. He applied to Harvard, the University of California at Berkeley, and the University of Southern California. He was admitted to all three but chose Berkeley because Harvard was too big and USC was a school for playboys. Zulfi applied to the same schools but was admitted only to USC. On 5th September 1947, less than a month after Pakistan's traumatic blood-scarred birth, Zulfi Bhutto flew west with Pilo's cousin Jahangir Jal Mughaseth.